the complicated nature of defining it, but for today's purpose, for this presentation, I thought it was helpful to underline once again the navigation, the importance of navigation and helping people find the resources that may help them move towards a place of well-being. And certainly that's what the goal of service coordination has been. So the overall goal of service coordination is to improve the life trajectory of court-involved youth with regards to poverty. Just getting that. There we go. So how do we do that? We do that by offering young people speedy access to needed services and resources. This was particularly important for us to focus on. What we saw was, as earlier mentioned by Dr. Ungar, we see a lot of people are involved in young people's lives, but oftentimes each person is dealing with the youth differently. And what we saw as practitioners who work with young people, what was often missing was the person who could actually take that young person and help activate them around something that was needed for them, such as food, housing, etc. We also wanted to work on improving their own navigation skills with regards to how to access resources by having a consistent model for them who knew the system. And in addition to that, providing opportunity to engage with the service coordinator who can support their evolving daily life needs. So it wasn't just do this one thing for me and then you're out. It's also checking in with the young person to find out what exactly it is they see as their needs. So with regards to who the project youth were, and continue to be, because this project goes till December. In total, we've processed through the service coordinators 104 court-involved or at-risk youth. Their general age was approximately 16. And as part of that, in the evaluation sample, we had 39 young people. So the next question is, what did we do as service coordinators in terms of targets, and how did they actually operate? Their job was to involve themselves with young people in all of these areas that you see before you that are pretty logical directions to head in when you want to redirect youth with regards to poverty trajectories. So, employment training, so jobs online, helping them access jobs online, picking up prescriptions around their medical needs, helping them to sign up for cooking classes, finding resources to pay for such things. These were all the jobs that service coordinators took on. Their bottom line was to improve young people's well-being and support them in the resources that were being identified by case managers or by the youth themselves. So one of the things that's important to highlight is that lives are complex, particularly for these youth. So a lot of what happened between service coordinators and youth was definitely done by text, which is no surprise. So this is actually a nice example of some of the dialogues that might happen. It's probably a bit more sped up. But 53% of the youth that the service coordinators worked with had more than one targeted need. So a youth who needed housing didn't necessarily stop there. He might also need to access the food bank, etc. So again, those were the jobs that the service coordinators took on. So in this case, this young person would have gone from housing to financial supports to identification needs to daily food needs. So service coordination support strategies, I think it's important to highlight a particular area that came to light as the project evolved, which was transportation poverty. Mobility is one of the key things that is true to all of these service areas. Just about all of the resources that anyone's ever going to need to access, you need to be able to get there. So what we learned as the project evolved is that the service coordinators were actually being asked to exclusively provide transportation, which we accommodated, but it's a really important area for us all to pay attention to when we suggest to a young person that they need to go to a school meeting and we don't consider how they're going to get there. Clerical support was another area that sort of came as the project evolved to light, because a lot of the work that they did was specifically in relation to helping young people fill out forms, very complicated processes for young people, what we take for granted, such as opening a bank account where you need numerous pieces of ID and various components and know how to speak to professionals. These were young people who had no such experience and needed a lot of guidance. So why is service coordination beneficial for a population like court-involved youth? So they lack adult support, they're young and inexperienced, they benefit from service coordination because of the consistent and quick availability of these adults to deal with them in a compassionate and responding way. We found that that was one of the most important things, was that quick and consistent response. These young people have poor knowledge of resources and are ill-prepared for navigating the system. They really are prematurely emancipated, and in a lot of ways, those of us who have teenagers would fully understand that our young people aren't ready to go and do many of the things that these young people need to do. And so they're working with a service coordinator who's knowledgeable about community services and pathways and have the navigation skills to model for the young people how to ask for things in certain environments such as banks or in ministry offices. Many of the young people that they worked with had developmental or learning challenges. They're often dysregulated and have rule-breaking behavior that's difficult for other people to accept. And as a result, they risk charges. So the service coordinators can advocate on behalf of the youth, and many times they were sitting in meetings trying to encourage housing projects or school officials to allow young people some leverage and make amendments with regards to how do we actually need to support this young person. The last area is mental health struggles. And in this regard, what's happened today is a lot of discussion about trauma-informed care. To provide young people with hopefulness and strength-based perceptions and compassion with regards to their struggles is really what service coordinators were able to do. So even when there's a no-show of a young person repeatedly, to have compassion and understanding around why they might be disorganized and miss appointments, why they lose their phones, why it's so difficult to contact them sometimes. All of these things are things that the service coordinators work through. Oops. The last slide is with regards to, in their own voices, what young people had to say with regards to service coordination. So these examples reflect that the young people felt heard, they felt understood, they felt not alone, and they felt that they really benefited from the concrete help. Thank you.
Just go ahead. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Markerly, and I'm just going to sit here because I can see my screen very well with my very high prescription glasses. And today we've been talking a lot about resilience, and I think we all have the outcome in mind of well-being. And the pathway through these challenges to well-being is one of resilience. And my key message in my 10-minute presentation will be that what is really essential is to have a daily resilience routine. And that has led to us developing an app to support youth based on the research. So I thought we would appreciate starting from legal framework. Canada is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child's anniversary is coming up. And it's a specific call that we develop legislation and practical services to protect the rights of children. And very, very specifically, violence and various violence forms are noted. And as you know, in Canada, in our provinces and territories, we have mandatory reporting laws, and those not only seek to protect children, but child welfare has a second mandate around well-being. Oh, okay. So just to get a bit of a quick glance at where we're at, a third of Canadians in population survey report that they've experienced physical, sexual abuse or witnessing IPV. So that, given that we believe that to be underreported, a third of adults say that they had abuse experiences before age 16. I think a really important piece is that 67% say they did not speak to anyone about the abuse, not family, friends, and not any authorities. So if we just take those two pieces of information, we can see a need for day-to-day resilience. Because when it comes to maltreatment and trauma, silence is not gold. The Sustainable Development Goals provide a very specific structure for us to support rights. Goal 16 is where the violence is, and it is to promote justice and peaceful, inclusive societies. So that quote really says that the rule of law and development have a significant interrelation. So whatever laws and policies we put into play really do impact child development. And the intention of this goal is to have strong regulations, accountable institutions, transparency. And we know in Ontario recently the age of protection has increased to include 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. That is not mandated reporting, but investigation and services can be provided. And this is also a really ideal time for us to think about e-interventions as kids are well into utilizing social media platforms in a way to organize their life and get information. To also give a context about that, Canada does have a ban on corporal punishment in schools but not in home, and a recent study has shown that where there is a full ban, there is benefit in a significant reduction in male aggression. A partial ban like we have does have an impact on female aggression, but not male aggression. So again, reasons for having resilience in mind as a daily piece. The other thing to note before I go through the resilience model is that Canada has a really high suicide rate. It's 5th from the top. And our hospitalizations for self-harm has increased 90%. And 14% of our population of youth have suicidal thinking. So I'll say resilience starts with living. You have to be alive to be resilient. So switch into some of the background, and this is from positive psychology that wants to say we need to emphasize those processes that support resilience, the PERMA model. Most noted with Sullivan, but there's a long history back on these concepts. And what you see first and foremost is positive emotion. So if you just take a pause and think of your day so far, negative to positive emotion, the ratio, of what that might have been yesterday, oftentimes we think we're trying to think more about negatives than about the positives. We have to effortfully think about the positives. But your ratio should be at least equal on negative to positives, if not more so on the positives, to be maximizing, galvanizing the resilience. So the second piece is engagement. So, be having a positive engagement in your tasks. And engagement, in this context, they really want to tap into that creativity engagement, where you lose a sense of time, you're like totally absorbed, and they call that flow. How many people can say that they know they've experienced flow? So your homework tonight is to go and find some flow. And so usually it's exercise, creative activity, things that are like usually rhythmic and creative. Mindfulness is that kind of intentional awareness, and relationships as resilience we've sort of definitely heard from today. And one thing I do want to say about this idea, youth have so many challenges in their context that of course they're going to be, you can't tell them to be mindful of this. I'll just give the example of Taraji Henson. Is it Taraji Henson from Empire Show? She said she came from the projects, and her key strategy was to be radically optimistic, to be like insanely optimistic. Because if she didn't have that when she went to an acting audition, you know, she needed that view to get the job, to feel confident enough to get the job. And when it comes to trauma, we do look at things like post-traumatic growth, seeing the positive learning out of it. And interestingly, it's really important to celebrate your accomplishments. And for child welfare youth, that can be quite difficult to say, yay me, I did a good job. We did exercises in a dating violence prevention group where they had to give compliments, and they found that very, very difficult to accept a compliment. Because in their environment, they're under-practiced in accepting and giving compliments. So the process we focus on in the app is executive functioning, which is the diagram right below. You'll see that it's working memory and being flexible in your thinking and being able to have self-control. And part of positive emotions includes things like engagement and having goals. So you see those two things really do work together. And you come to our app called Joy Pop because its goal is to have you have pops of joy throughout your day.